Welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a bit different. We're integrating two deep investigations, one into the human experience and another into system architecture, to reveal a really quiet phenomenon, the gradual disappearance of significance in modern life. Look, if you've ever achieved a major life milestone only to find that ordinary life completely absorbed the feeling almost immediately, you are definitely not alone. Today we aren't just looking at psychology in isolation, and we're not just critiquing technology. Instead, we're going to look at what becomes true only when we integrate these two realities. And this brings us right to our central question. What does this actually change about how you understand yourself? We're going to explore this deeper integration between you and the environment surrounding you. What does it actually mean when the conditions that allow meaning to stand apart slowly vanish? Let's dive into the architecture of our everyday experience to find out.
Part 1. Important moments still exist.
We have to start with a really simple recognition. The big events that shape our lives, they haven't vanished. Promotions, milestones, celebrations, they absolutely still happen. Meaningful conversations still occur. You haven't stopped living a life full of significant events. Yet for some reason, they seem to become ordinary far faster than they used to. That's because extraordinary milestones now enter the exact same uninterrupted stream as your ordinary tasks. Notice how everything arrives with identical speed and urgency. Let's say at 9:15 a.m., you experience a major life milestone. Maybe you land your absolute dream job. Just 5 minutes later, at 9:20 a.m., your computer aggressively demands a software update, right next to an urgent email about a weekend mattress sale. Systemically, they are perfectly equalized. There is no hierarchy anymore. The system doesn't necessarily claim every event is equally important. It just presents them under increasingly similar conditions.
So, important moments still happen, for sure, but because they arrive within a system of flat priority, they're absorbed into ordinary life almost immediately. The feeling barely has a second to stay with you. Modern environments increasingly remove hierarchy, which means the distance between a profound chapter of your life and a mundane Tuesday quietly disappears. It's kind of like throwing a massive boulder into a river that's moving so fast, the splash is erased before the ripples can even form.
Part 2. Not an emotional problem. It is incredibly common to blame ourselves when a huge life event suddenly feels hollow or fleeting. We think, I'm just not mindful enough or I'm ungrateful. But as we step back and analyze this, we realize the problem is actually not emotional numbness. The person, you, did not lose the ability to care. The system simply replaced hierarchy with simultaneity, meaning it presents everything to you at exactly the same time. Priority no longer emerges naturally from the structure of your environment. It's now this relentless internal task that you have to construct for yourself every single day. And frankly, it's a task that never fully ends.
Think about it this way. A heartfelt message from a close friend sharing a life-changing update and a commercial promotion telling you your streaming subscription is expiring. They now flash in front of you as the exact same signal. They use the same visual language, the same red notification bubble, the exact same chime, and they make the exact same demands for your immediate attention. Meaning did not disappear from your life. Your environment just quietly stopped telling you what matters most.
Part 3. Significance depends on contrast. This builds to our next realization. Meaning relies on the physical and psychological architecture of contrast. Before anything can become meaningful, it has to be distinguishable. Significance isn't just about the event itself. It's deeply dependent on the space around it. Historically, physical spaces protected significance by intentionally reducing interruption. Think of a sprawling museum or a quiet historic town square with just a single monument in the center. The architecture itself established hierarchy before you even made a conscious decision. Empty space allowed significance to breathe. It allowed you to encounter something important without immediate competition. But in modern digital systems, every surface is just another display, another screen, another source of incoming data. That protective, empty space is completely gone. Reality didn't become less significant. The environment gradually removed the contrast that once allowed meaning to stand apart. And without that contrast, importance becomes incredibly difficult to experience. The extraordinary no longer arrives surrounded by silence. It arrives right in the middle of a continuous, noisy flow.
And this uninterrupted competition is not a malfunction. It is the actual, intentional mechanism of our modern environment. Significance is now forced to continually compete rather than just endure. Important events no longer stand apart because of the space created around them. Instead, the question shifts from what actually deserves my attention, to what manages to capture my attention first.
Part 4. Memory loses its landmarks. Which brings us to a really profound consequence regarding how we remember the blueprint of our own lives. When contrast disappears, fewer experiences remain psychologically distinct. Without contrast, significance is difficult to recognize. And without that distinction, memory slowly loses its natural landmarks. There was a time when important moments naturally divided life into chapters, creating clear lines in the story you told yourself. Today, those boundaries are so much harder to find. And it's not because your life is boring or uneventful, but because the landmarks themselves are continuously overwritten by the very next input.
There's a great observation about this. A life without emotional boundaries can quietly begin to feel like one continuous movement. Because the rhythm of our daily systems has learned to continue without ever pausing, the mind no longer experiences the years as separate, distinct chapters. Every system around us seeks continuity and momentum. Life just keeps moving forward, slowly shrinking the emotional distance between one achievement and the next.
Without those distinct boundaries, personal history flattens. Life gradually feels like one uninterrupted stream of immediate demands. I mean, think about reading a book where there are literally no paragraph breaks, no chapters, no blank pages, just words bleeding from cover to cover. When every chapter is allowed to feel like just another page, one day the entire story begins to read like a single, unbroken sentence. In this environment, feeling like nothing is particularly significant isn't a personal failure at all. It's the expected result of the system.
Part 5. The disappearance of difference. So we arrive at the quiet, inevitable consequence of an environment that no longer tells you what matters most. Everything emerges naturally from the interaction of these human and system investigations. Every achievement, every routine task, and every celebration arrives at the exact same emotional volume. When every single week demands identical levels of output and attention, life doesn't become empty. It just becomes continuous. It loses the feeling that one moment was ever truly different from another.
Significance actually requires time to accumulate. It needs permission to stop. But in our current architecture, an event occurs, it enters the continuous flow, and almost instantly it gets interrupted and replaced by the very next signal. Before a major event has even settled into your memory, the architecture of the system introduces the next competing demand. When visibility itself is temporary, significance simply fails to build. The big takeaway here, you didn't stop living meaningful moments. You just gradually stopped living inside an environment that allows meaning to remain separate from everything else. The blending happens quietly. The remarkable simply loses the contrast that once allowed you to recognize it.
Nothing became less important. Everything became equally immediate. It's a profound realization when you step back and look at it analytically. Nothing actually became less meaningful in your life. Meaning just gradually lost the conditions that allowed it to remain visible. The difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary slowly disappeared, swallowed up by continuous circulation.
The architecture surrounding your experience quietly stopped preserving distinction. The extraordinary moments are still happening, right there in your hands, but they unfold inside a system that rarely gives them the time or the space necessary to remain visible enough to reshape your reality. When we integrate these two investigations, we realize the meaning is still entirely there. Nothing fundamentally new was learned today, but hopefully, everything is now understood differently.
I want to leave you with this final thought and a question to carry with you. Now that you know the system isn't broken, but is actually functioning exactly as designed, what changes for you when the architecture of experience stops preserving distinction? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.